Created in 2005 and hosted by security industry veterans, Paul Security Weekly is your source for in-depth coverage of the latest vulnerabilities, exploits, and security research. Our weekly security news discussion dives deep into the security issues we face today and potential solutions in a fun and lively atmosphere. Each week, we bring on guests from the security community to learn about their journey and discuss topics relevant to their work and research. You can also subscribe to our show by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Paul Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher. We've recorded a ton of content over the years, so we created Spotify playlists featuring some of our favorite episodes, including interviews with Marcus Random, John McAfee, and Chris Roberts, to name a few. You can find them at securityweekly.com/starter packs.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2024. We're recording live from Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with Mike Fay, CEO and co-founder of Island. Mike, we're here to talk about enterprise browsers, and I personally probably live most of my working day in a browser, whether it's document, email, etc. That's where security is important these days, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, back when you and I started, we had DOS, and then Windows was on top of DOS. Well, now that's almost the way the browser is. Browsers on top of Windows or on top of the Mac OS, and that's our new OS. And as a result, it provides a massive opportunity to upgrade our experience and our security, but also challenges and fears and concerns.
Just a few challenges, yeah. And I think probably fair to say these days, most attackers, they don't necessarily want root on your laptop. They want that cookie out of your browser. They want that access in your browser, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm curious. So everybody needs a secure browser. They want a secure browser. What's that distinction then to say enterprise browser?
So I think when you really think about what an enterprise browser is, it's a realization that our businesses spend 80+% of their time in the browser, our users. And that browser was built for consumers, built for 5 billion consumers, and the lowest common denominator out of 5 billion consumers. So the knowledge worker wasn't left with a lot of tools, a lot of help. We have a browser that is quick to finish your shopping list and give you your home address and your credit card number. But that call center worker that's been copying and pasting the same things 50 times does not get help.
Right.
They are still opening up VPNs, and they have to have MDMs, and they get backhauled to web filtering. Then they get put on Citrix, and all this stuff gets piled on, and their experience and productivity just keeps getting beaten down. So the enterprise browser says, what if we took that wonderful browser, and thanks to the Chromium open source project, we use the same rendering, the same look, the same feel, but we build into it the end user experience components. We build into it the needs of the business. We get them in more capabilities, but then we also make it more secure. And it's the combination of those three, which really is kind of the future of cybersecurity, not being a one-off, bolt-on, but being a built-in solution, a comprehensive, single-threaded solution. So the enterprise browser is the statement that those three matter. It's not just one of the constituencies matter.
So, and clearly too, you don't need to re-implement how to build HTM. You're re-implementing what the users are needing. And you mentioned, that user experience, but I don't think the individual enterprise users are, the ones that are say, oh, throw this on my credit card, I want to buy this.
Right.
There's other players here that is clearly appealing to. Tell us about that.
So when you think about those constituencies, let's start with obviously cybersecurity. Having it rethought on how an enterprise wants to work. Even password managers can integrate it to it rather than bolt on, but changing the way the encryption on the solution works, changing the way that keystrokes are entered into the browser, and can somebody sniff that? Can they actually see that? And then rethinking the way data works. So we worked with one organization, very large chain, and they had almost 5,000 rules trying to keep customer data inside their ecosystem. All were replaced by one simple statement. Data in Salesforce can't leave Salesforce. It was gone. That was the done of those rules. So by having control over what happens in that last mile, you can rethink a lot of use cases, BYOD, contractor, but you also can rethink call centers and point of sale solutions. You can start getting people off VDI that don't need that bad experience and that hyper expense. And then you start to think about disaster recovery and the ability to move devices quickly. Then you add on the productivity to the end user. And then you start giving tools back to the business. Instead of having a bunch of end user monitoring tools, the browser tells them what the end user is experiencing. You want to build automation. You don't have to just do it at the API level. Now you can automate right at the end user and bring them into that process. So there really is a massive amount of tech per constituency that we bring to bear.
So, and it sounds like that, especially a lot of what you're saying returns to the user, that positive user experience. And that to me resonates because we have shadow everything. We have shadow cloud these days, shadow, administration.
Yep.
We don't have shadow browsers, but people will work around it, right?
Sure.
Like just copy and pasting, things like that.
Yeah.
I imagine too, I'm a big fan. Let's have passkeys. Let's have strong multi-factor authentication. I suspect there's still shared passwords out there though, because not all these SaaS apps support them, things like that. So that's got to be something where this type of approach can help, right?
It can, but beyond just the sharing passwords, now we can rethink how we say contractors. We let a contractor log into the browser. When the browser comes up, it can inspect their machine, like an MDM would, understand if the machine is sitting in a state you care about, and then with dexterity, decide what is appropriate based on the situation, based on the network, the machine. What do I want to give them access to? Is it read-only? Is it full access? But then we can have the passwords to move into those actually unknown to the contractor. So the contractor logs in, then we can, actually have the browser make the next login, so we can keep them at an appropriate level of control. So we reduce that whole password experience, but we also can do anomaly detection in a way others can't. Anomaly detection, for the most part, has to be done on the back-end infrastructure. We're able to do it at the actual edge and understand what's really going on with the user. Are they where they were yesterday? What does this really look like? So we don't have to rely just on passwords to authenticate an individual or just on a network path. We can take the whole capacity into effect.
So it sounds like then, especially the monitoring, looking for anomalies, classic, computer security, cybersecurity team looking at that.
Yeah.
But it's also the security team typically, in my experience, has been working with the engineers, talking about the products and application security. Who gets pulled in to actually make these decisions about this is the browser to use, this is how we're rolling it out?
Yeah, so usually it's a combination effort, right? The security team will look at it and say, this would be an upgrade in our security posture. We'd love to see this. And they're the ones that put the regulations or requirements that often produced other things like VDI to call centers or on tablets or wherever it showed up. So they bring that to the CIO. The CIO is grateful that, wow, I can deliver a better end user experience and save a ton of money to the organization.
Be happy, right?
So the CIO often ends up the owner, but it's the CISO sponsorship that's very important in that. And together they get a better solution for both. And it's one of the things I really love about working in this space is it's no longer security against the business or the end user against security. We're going to upgrade everybody in one step and be able to have a positive experience. And that crawl, walk, run through that journey, we can keep delivering along the way. One of the biggest use cases we have, we call say yes. And it's the CISO's ability to say yes to whatever the question is. If you want to use LinkedIn and have private messaging, great. We can audit it with the browser. You want to you want to engage a Chinese workforce, but you don't want to cross, the Great Firewall. You can still push policy local and do that. And you can handle the different regulations and data requirements, country by country, because you're not pulling it back to a central source. You're doing it at the actual browser location. So the policy runs local. So we see the cybersecurity teams being a huge benefactor, but massive ROI back to the business.
And that's got to be compelling too, because it sounds honestly simple,
yes.
Right? You're rattling off, VDI, all these other things, jumping through this hoop, this other hoop. But if it's just a browser, it sounds dismissive, but just a browser sounds so easy.
It's very easy to deploy, very easy to imagine, very easy to start off with. You can build a very comprehensive solution with it. But the reality is, we had one organization that was attacked and they were shut down, almost 10,000 individuals. They pushed us out and got themselves back up on alternate devices over a weekend. We were there, they basically took the whole company BYOD overnight.
Sure.
So it's a very easy process to roll out, but it's a massive platform. So as you want to start displacing technologies, reducing that technical complexity and that footprint, it can grow with that. Or you can just integrate it into your existing stack and make it stronger. It's really where are you at in your own journey?
Yeah, because I can't imagine people aren't used to using browsers. So this isn't a tool that they're like, wait, we have to train them on this or something like that.
Definitely no training needed. But the first time somebody sees a 50 copy paste buffer, realizes it's not just that, they get excited. The first time they see a number pulled off a VoIP call and the information of a customer filled out, they love that. And then finally, when they don't bring up a VPN and the passwords just work and it's on their phone and it's on their tablet and they can deploy it wherever they want, it becomes something that grows very quickly in an environment. But you're right. There's a native intuition of how to do it, how to work with it. And that's a beautiful thing from a cybersecurity business enablement of that end user.
And there's got to be, in the idea of, often security shows up, there tends to be pushback. What will this do? Is this going to, from the developer side, is it going to slow down my build? Is it going to slow me down? Is it going to impede me? Call center, I have to handle this call within a 60-second time frame. I can't imagine that's the kind of pushback you get here, though, because it's
usually we speed things up dramatically, and we give them control they never had. I mean, if you just think about it, the browser services in so many different ways, but it was never built for you. If you had a company well-funded, fully dedicated to just what you do as an enterprise, you will find there are opportunities to add value to everybody in that stack every day. And we get thousands of feature requests from our customers now. And they're all about, if you did this, we could get rid of this. I wouldn't have this problem anymore. I could resolve this. And so it's becoming this massive platform driven by our customers to their enjoyment and outcome of doing their job.
And there's got to be just a massive network effect, because you don't need to do this one deployment is using LinkedIn. Lots of people are using LinkedIn. Lots of people are using Salesforce. So, one feature request over here, I'm going to imagine, helps this other population. Right?
Very much. It's, we had a great vision to get the browser to, if you will, 200-300 customers. Now what's driving it are all these users that are bringing us back all these brilliant features that we can continue to build in for their benefit. And you're right, there is no end in sight of what can be done.
And a lot of the things that my mind immediately is going to the end user, making that end user experience. But you touched on a little bit already. There are benefits to the enterprise as well.
Yes.
You mentioned just password management, the asset inventory being a rollout to fleet. DLP seems another one that I always have to pay attention to. That it tends to be other teams of data privacy team, data security, but it just goes beyond security, right?
Yeah. If you think about, let's enable some contractor. Well, we're going to ship them a laptop. It's going to have an OS on it. We're going to put security on it. Then we're going to push MDM. Then we're going to push a VPN. Then we're going to backhaul their traffic for web filtering. If we really are nervous, we might even put them on VDI into that process. Then we'll push a password manager. Then we'll do compliance and audit checking. Everything I just said is not required. Literally, that's just the browser doing that.
And that just seems faster, easier.
It's wildly faster.
The vendor experience must just be like.
And the cost is wildly different. And so these cybersecurity budgets that are challenged, yes, they grow, but the demands on them are ridiculous. We give them oxygen back. Finally, they can stop. They can turn off some tool sets and spend that money on all the great tech we see here at a show like this. So it really provides oxygen back into the system.
Yeah, and I think, you and Island have gotten some great validation of this, right? You just had a great investment recently.
We did. We just got valued at $3 billion, which is quite an honor. It's double our last valuation, and in this market, an up round is something that you should take serious. Much less a up round by $1.5 billion. So, and that came on our customers. Yes, we performed. Yes, we've delivered. But what drove it was just the wins at the customer and the value we were driving. When you hear that value, kind of like what you said, well, that could be anywhere. It's not unique to that financial firm or not unique to that healthcare. Like, who doesn't have that challenge? And that's what we found. Literally, there isn't a vertical that we don't have a couple of the top 10 in. And I don't think there's a vertical that we can't be at the 100-person company. So it really spans the gambit of size.
That's amazing. I think, to me, what makes me happy is that we're talking about security that is making users happy. So
yes.
Definitely appreciate that. That's a breath of fresh air at this day and age.
It is different, yeah.
Well, thank you, Mike. We are out of our own time here, but this was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
To find out more about Island, visit securityweekly.com/island, RSAC. And stick around. We're going to have some new interviews coming up now after this break. Welcome to RSA Conference. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by GitLab. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and joining me today for this interview is Josh Lemos, Chief Information Security Officer at GitLab. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here, and I wanted to talk about one of the most boring things ever. Sorry. Maybe we can make it sexy.
Yeah.
Supply chain.
Yeah.
But maybe we can throw some AI enabled in there. I don't think you're the type of person to go buzzword, but we're going to have to mention AI.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So there's a lot of basics of the CICD pipeline: write code, build code, deploy it, etc. Why are we still worried about the securing the CICD? I think these conversations have been going on for 20 years at least, right?
It's a long-running conversation, and I think that there is a multitude of factors that lead us here. When I talk to customers, everyone is on a different maturity curve in terms of where they are with their source code management, their CI pipelines, their dependency management, where they have an office of open source, any number of things. But one of the factors, interestingly enough, is how many build pipelines they have. And in most cases, they have some number of build pipelines, all with different levels of security assurance. Some are closely managed, others not so much. And they generally lack governance across all of those different pipelines. And so one of the, I think, goals and metrics that a lot of companies should have when it comes to supply chain security is, can we consolidate down to a number of systems through which we have visibility so that we can get to some amount of software governance?
Gotcha. Something that our human brains can reason with, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, because I'm a fan of, there's a huge push the last couple of years, memory safety, Rust, Go, et cetera. What's kind of that equivalent for the CI/CD pipeline? You're kind of hinting at that, of condensing into something that we can reason through, or has more governance. Is there a better future? Can we be optimistic about the supply chain?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of principles that apply to supply chain security and CI pipelines in that regard. And the first one is really minimalism. How can we shrink down what we're doing so we're protecting less surface area? And that can be in your base container images. That can be in your dependencies, right? How many times do you go into a project and you see a massive list of imports, right? You're like, are these even used, right? Because it's creating a lot of churn and a lot of operational overhead on all those teams that are patching things, and they might be patching those CVEs for absolutely no reason. So it's just an ineffective use of our security resources, our engineering resources, and energy there. So if we can minimize that to something reasonable, and I do think this is an area where AI can actually help us as well in a very boring use case, is looking at dependency reduction, right? Can we reduce to sort of a min set of known dependencies in our projects that we should patch and manage effectively?
Yeah, and I think, I don't think it's a bad thing at all for security to be boring, right?
Not at all.
So, we don't want to be tedious. I think that's what you were hinting at. Everything you were describing was, why are developers spending more time on other people's code, fixing this dependency, this known CVE? And you alluded to AI. I would love to have that conversation about AI, how AI, how it can be helping the developers rather than the sky is falling perspective of that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about, is this AI is just like the developer you can run 24/7? Are they on their own? What's their role? How are they helping?
I think my current view of the problem space is something where it is developer plus AI together in the equation, where you can essentially have a AI AppSec consultant sitting by you all day to do some of the more boring work. And maybe that is even changing the way that you start writing a new project or new code. So, test-driven development is something that people always aspire to do, but maybe with the creation of all of these new chat assistants for code development, code generation, and generative AI, that may lead us to a point where you can start with writing test cases through an AI agent, and those test cases can then drive your code generation subsequently. It can also do things like explain vulnerabilities. So you're in your pipeline, you run a static code analysis, or you have software composition analysis tools running, and it spits out an output to the developer, and they're like, I don't know what this means, right? AI not only could do something boring, like say, we found 10,000 issues, but if you just go to like this version of this Java library, it fixes 9,000 of them.
Do this one simple trick, right? Yeah.
That's a massive time savings, right?
And so part of, I very much appreciate this approach because you're CISO, you're describing this embrace of AI, embrace of using AI for coding, obviously from a security perspective with your security hat on. So it sounds to me that test-driven development you can have more confidence in it. Does having that angle to say, let's test, let's use AI for the quality, is that a deliberate choice, or is it more of just how developers might embrace it?
I think my view on how we can get to a better set of outcomes is largely informed by how we can set up the right environments and right constructs for success. And if we know what we're testing for, we know the problems that we're trying to solve for.
Okay.
And it really gets back to like basic engineering fundamentals and doing the right things. And if we can accelerate doing the right things, it's not like people don't want to do these things. They absolutely do, but they're generally time constrained. They have to ship features. So if we can accelerate the velocity and sort of the tedium through AI as an assistant, that can get us to a better set of outcomes. I also am a believer that if you just ask AI to generate a bunch of code, it's not going to generate the most secure code. And we've seen that in a couple of research studies that have come out over the past couple of years, right? Which is like if you give it to a CS student, they're going to generate a bunch of insecure code. If you give it to a senior developer, they're probably going to write great code and they're going to get the velocity benefit more so than a junior developer. So there's promise of like, we'll have many fewer developers. I think that is untrue. But what I think is our developers who are more seasoned will get better and will get faster.
Gosh, so very, very much assistive rather than a replacement is how you're describing that. Yeah. Then, so we've got AIs can generate as assistants, as you're saying, with the code. And we did start talking about supply chain, very, very exciting topics here. Will AI help with just explaining not what the vulns are, but with what's in a package? Is that a use case that's reasonable, or do we have better ways of saying this is what we can trust the provenance and how we built and created this software artifact?
Yeah, I think AI provenance is kind of a juicy topic, or software provenance is kind of a juicy topic. There is some benefit to understanding where things come from and creating some rules around it, and AI may be able to help us there. I'm not entirely sure that we'll ever get around the problem of the fact that there are tens of thousands of node packages created every single day, and that we'll get in front of that provenance just on a sheer numbers game. But there are other benefits to supply chain security that, again, going back to some of the more boring things. Can we get to a point where we can have amazing integration test coverage, amazing unit test coverage, and have those generated for us automatically? And then get to the point where if we need to upgrade a dependency, that can be upgraded. It can go through the cycle of testing, integration tests, and know with some degree of confidence that that's not going to break your build, and have that entire loop happen faster. I think chasing vulnerabilities is a fool's errand ultimately. But if we can get to the principles of minimalism, if we can get to patching really what matters to our environment, ultimately there's some benefits for security from AI and code generation and generative AI ultimately that we can all benefit from as an industry.
Well, that's interesting. I'm curious then if we save developer time, don't play Pokemon and collect all the CVEs and have to fix them. The AppSec team doesn't have to look at every single dependency. We could go through that list of tedium could be pretty easy to go through. Yeah. But if we got rid of that, what would you rather either the developers or that security team be focusing on instead? What are the richer stuff that you think both appeal to humans that aren't boring, that would also have that really good impact on security?
Oh boy, you want to talk about secure by design? Is that where we're going here? Yeah, it's the other part of, we get the most benefit and the highest leverage out of our security teams by looking at threat modeling and how we design systems, but also how we build systems to abstract away human intervention, like zero-touch infrastructure deployments. So we can get to modeling out all of our different deployment models and taking, developers out of writing Terraform or Cloud Foundation code, right, to be able to push out infrastructure. We can then know that, like, if they're using these deployment mechanisms, we don't have to really spend their time on that. We could spend our time on, are we designing the right data structures? Are we thinking about how we are managing our data responsibly, how we're integrating with other points, right? It's not just open source. I think that the conversation around supply chain gets distilled down to OSS often. It's like, think about all the commercial integrations we have as well. Like, those present equal risk. We just don't hear about them as often.
Yeah. And especially too, because you're just all these credentials to talk to this API, this other API, that protecting credentials is one of the hardest parts. That's how we've seen all types of breaches occur, right?
Yeah. I think the API key token leaks, identity breaches are the, sort of bane of our existence presently.
Yes.
And until we get a better handle on that, I think those still present the largest supply chain risk, much more so than, the XZ utils example or some of the others.
Sure. Yeah. So, which is exciting, but I think to the theme is like the boring stuff, doing authentication right, doing identity right. You kind of need to have that in place, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think that as much as people don't want to spend the time to think about how to do least privilege or manage their identity or get their AWS IAM permissions correct, like, those are the essential foundations to sort of mitigating risk and having runbooks to deal with those things when they inevitably go wrong at some point, right?
So part of what you were talking a little bit earlier too about the infrastructure, immutable infrastructure, Terraform, I'll throw out the infrastructure as code as the example. And I don't know if I have a good grasp of this yet, or if this is a good question. Help me out here. Do we have a CICD as code? Is that kind of the future that as you're talking about, like the governance, consolidating, minimalizing, is that the helpful direction, or is there something different we should be thinking about for the supply chain?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what we do is define our pipelines as code, right?
Sure.
So we define each stage as code. And in those stages, we say, these are the different scans that will run. These are what we're looking for as test coverage in each stage of the build pipeline. So we are defining what must happen from a governance perspective at each stage in the CI pipeline. And so I think that ultimately is a way to get good visibility, number one.
Okay.
Tighter feedback loops to the developer, number two. And then necessary governance over the whole thing. And then throughout that, you can check for, other basic things like branch protection, right? Like, no one wants to sit around and talk about branch protection. But like,
look at the time.
Yeah, and dual control and make sure that all of that happens. But
right.
There are simple things like emergency changes have to happen, and we're not always going to get another developer up at 2 a.m. to approve a change. But what we want to do is launch essentially an audit event that says, fire this off to like the compliance team, make sure that this is followed up with a ticket so that the entire workflow is captured when we have to prove this event out for an audit of some sort. And if that can all be automated, again, massive savings for the security team, for the engineering team.
Yes.
Everyone goes home happy.
We're going to go home happy after this conversation. This is a good one, Josh. I want to thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, you helped us very much turn a non-boring topic into something that's actually a bit more compelling and shows some promise even for AI. So definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I want to thank everybody for listening. If you want to learn more about GitLab, go to securityweekly.com/GitLab RSAC and stick around. We have a lot more interviews coming up after this break.